this event launching World PI Week 2023. It's great to have so many of you joining online from our global audience right across the world, speakers online too, and we have experts here in the studio with me because this is a very special event. We are, for the very first time, launching World PI Week live from a hospital, and we are honoured to be guests here at the University Hospital in Leuven, Belgium, for this very, very special launch. But your participation online is vital too, because that's what's going to make all the success of this year's World PI Week. My name is Sue Saville, an independent health journalist, and delighted to be guiding discussions today because we're going to be looking at something very special indeed, focusing not only on the celebrations of the achievements that have been made in this sphere, but also on something very particular, something that can make a great difference to disease knowledge, to patient outcomes, to medical research, and that is data. Robust, quality data that can really make a difference in terms of research and medical innovation and changing lives. And the theme of this year's event is turning real-world data into knowledge for better PID care. And of course, if you can harness the holistic power of data, this has four major impacts. It's going to help with diagnosis, treatment and care, also with research and innovation because it'll generate evidence for clinical trials as well, and indeed through medical education, raising awareness about the primary immunodeficiency community. So, how can data make a difference in this way? Great big promises there. I have with me here in the studio two experts who are going to help us ascertain this. I'd like to welcome firstly our host here at the University Hospital in Leuven, Professor Isabel Mates, a previous president of the European Society for Immunodeficiencies, ESID. You set up the pediatric primary immunodeficiency unit here, and you're responsible for the diagnosis and treatment of children with PID. Professor, we are so grateful that you have us here in your own university hospital. Here too, Sari Workman, a board member of the International Nursing Group for Immunodeficiencies, known as INGID, and also a clinical nurse specialist and senior clinical research nurse at London's Royal Free Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. And Sari spends half her time on research, half her time on her clinical work. She set up advanced nurse clinics for immunodeficiencies, and she's also authored many papers on this subject. So, through the power of the internet, we have other experts joining us online. We have Dr. Nazir Malawi, a paediatrician specializing in immune hematology. He's at the Necker Enfants Malades University Hospital in Paris. Dr. Malawi manages the French National Reference Center for PIDs and is also a previous chair of the European Society for Immunodeficiencies Registry and a member of the advisory board of the International Patient Organization for Primary Immunodeficiencies, known as IPOPI, which is a bit quicker to say. We have also joining us online Ottilia Stanger from the International Patient Organization for Primary Immunodeficiencies, from now on IPOPI. It was after her daughter's diagnosis with the PID that Ottilia became a nurse. She learnt about the legal aspects, and she has been the chair and is now the chair of ARPID, which is the national organization for support in her home country of Romania. Also online, coming to us from Malaysia, Bruce Lim. He is a carer and also a patient representative of MyPoppy, that's the Malaysian Patients Organisation for Primary Immunodeficiencies. He chaired it and he co-founded it. Bruce's day job, he runs an engineering business, but he's done fantastic work in raising awareness and campaigning so that more healthcare professionals, public, government know about PIDs. We're also going to have a contribution video from Antonio Condino, who is a professor of experimental medicine at the Institute of Biomedical Sciences and also director at the Department of Immunology at the University of São Paulo in Brazil. So, welcome to all our speakers in the studio and online. It's absolutely lovely to have everybody with us. This is a very, very exciting occasion. The first discussion we're going to start with is trying to understand a little bit about the meaning of real-world data in the context of PIDs. What does it actually mean for research? I've bigged it up at the outset, saying it's going to make such an impact, and it would be really interesting to understand what this brings for patients. Perhaps we should hear first from those with the personal responsibility for their youngsters, to hear through their eyes. Bruce Lim in Malaysia, perhaps if I could start with you. How would you say that real-world data has really influenced the care for your own son?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. First of all, I would like to greet all the Muslim friends and families. Happy Eid festival, and Selamat Hari Raya for all the Muslim in Malaysia and Indonesia. My personal experience basically is about my son. My son is affected by Bruton XLA. He was actually the first patient on subcutaneous IG when he was only 10 years old. It is a pilot study done by the Hospital University Kebangsaan Malaysia. The study basically monitored his trough level, and I basically know there are a lot of benefits from SAIG, but he is the real life experience or live data. So from that study, I am very glad that the outcome of this study was Caleb bronchitis reversed because of the high dosage of SAIG administered. And he never had any major infections throughout his entire, from 10 years old to now he's 19 years old. I mean, the study itself, the outcome of the study itself is published into a medical paper in Malaysia, and it is available for all medical practitioners. And I'm very honored and glad to say that today in Malaysia, we have 3 PID patients on subcutaneous, and the same subcutaneous program has been extended to CIDP patient and neuro patients in Malaysia. And my poppy is honored to help those patients with this subcutaneous therapy treatment.
Bruce, that's really interesting to hear. And Attilia, I'd like to ask you, because I guess from what Bruce is saying, data works both ways. When you've got the benefits of learning more from that data, it might benefit individual patients. But as Bruce's case illustrates, and perhaps your own with your own daughter, you can feed into that. So it's a two-way process, Attilia. What benefits are you seeing?
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe my story is more about how a personal experience can eventually lead to data collection. So my daughter Maya, she was diagnosed with a PID more than 10 years ago when she was only 6 years old. At that moment, she was in the intensive care unit and she was struggling to live. Having a proper diagnosis and treatment brought her a better quality of life, and she was able to return to school and play with children of her own age. But after a few years, something else happened. Romania, our country, faced a severe immunoglobulin shortage, and most of the PID patients couldn't access their life-saving treatment for almost a whole year, leaving deep marks on the physical and mental health of the Romanian PID patients. At that moment, I was, let's say, so only a mother of a child living with a PID. I had little involvement as a volunteer in the local patient organization. This particular crisis triggered for me the need to do more for my daughter and for all patients living with a PID in order for them to have a better quality of life and constant access to treatment. I started by telling our story in the national media, by contacting authorities in my country and raise awareness about PIDs and about the fact that immunoglobulins are essential medicines for PID patients. I even organized a protest in front of the Ministry of Health together with other patient organizations who needed access to immunoglobulins. Then I went further and I've told our story at an international level through IPOPI, the International Patient Organization for Primary Immunodeficiencies. My work was seen and recognized, and shortly after I became the chair of the Romanian PAD patient organization, and afterwards an IPOPI board member. And I am now in a position from where I can truly make a difference by being one of the voices that the PAD community needs. The IG shortage in Romania was also an alarm signal for other European countries, as we heard that more EU countries faced IG shortages. Thus, in the context of an IPOPI EU PID forum, IPOPI developed a survey to assess the immunoglobulin shortages across EU member states from the patient's perspective. According to this survey, we found out that the majority of EU countries experienced or are still experiencing an IG shortage. This was 12 of the 16 responding countries, and that access to IGs worsened after the COVID-19 pandemic. It was also reported that the main reason for these shortages is that Europe does not collect enough plasma for producing plasma-derived medicines. This survey is an example of how an individual and national experience can lead to relevant data collection. Through this data, we have now concrete fundamentals to advocate for an increase of plasma collection to meet PAD patients' needs across Europe, and we also encourage national patient organizations worldwide to use the data available and to bring change in their own countries.
Ottilia, thank you so much. It's so fantastic to hear that personal experience. And I'm going to stick to first names, if I may, throughout. Sorry, what about from a nurse perspective? How important is that data?
Yeah, I think real-world data it's really important. It's especially important for sharing the information about how we manage our patients, how our patients are diagnosed. Many of our patients' immunodeficiencies are rare diseases, and many of our patients may have infections that they can't get rid of. And so what we will do is we will speak to our colleagues and say, I've got this patient and they've had an infection for ages. We've tried this, and then somebody else will say, well, we've got a patient and we've tried this and we've tried this and this has worked. So then we will share that data, and we'll share our data with them and they'll share their data with us, and then hopefully we can come to a solution. And so it's really vital.
That's so interesting. Isabel, in your clinician role here at the University Hospital in Leuven, is that your experience? Have you got concrete
data which in turn can help other patients, can help in the treatment of other patients? And actually, as you say, these are really rare and sometimes ultra rare conditions, and even if you find one particular complication in one single patient, it can help patients worldwide if you at least report it and share these data. And I think that's really crucial, because data changes the everyday life of every PID patient, in my opinion.
Thank you, yes. And I wonder, Nizar in Paris, is that your experience, your involvement with the French registry? What sort of examples have you got of where data makes a difference?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for organizing this very important meeting. And I totally concur with everything that has been said. And indeed, sharing data is of the utmost importance. So, amongst several examples, we can certainly say that we are more knowledgeable now than we were even 5 or 10 years ago. So, for example, we know now that patients with primary immunodeficiencies can present with initial symptoms not only during childhood, but also during teenagehood or adulthood, and even, after 50 years. And that was not something that was commonly known before we were able to gather data and to analyze the data. And this is thanks to, the data sharing and the data platforms at the national, but also continental level, and the EASID registry is one of the major platforms worldwide to do that. Another aspect is that the potential diseases and symptoms that patients with primary immunodeficiencies can have during their lifetime, which I think is very important to stress, that we need to have a data on repeated follow-ups. So we know now that patients might present symptoms that are of autoimmunity or autoinflammation, or even proliferation such as malignancies, and even in sub-specific PIDs, we have now gathered data that show that it is not an epiphenomenon, meaning that it has happened, let's say, coincidentally or serendipitously, but it is even a low-intensity signal that needs to be known and addressed specifically for this group of patients or for a larger group of PID patients in order to provide patients the best level of care.
Thank you. And Zoe makes an interesting point there. Perhaps, Sari, you'd pick it up about the collection of the data. Do you find with patients they're happy to share that data? Are there any privacy, GDPR issues that get in the way, or are they very happy to share that?
Well, I can only really speak on behalf of our patient cohort, but we are very lucky with our patients, and they are very willing to do this. And like Nizar was saying, there's the ECID registry, and so in the UK we have a UK PID registry, and the patients have 3 different options to choose from, and they can decide to consent just for the UK PID registry. They can decide to have their data entered into the UK PID registry, which is then transferred into the ECID registry. And then they can also have a third consent where they allow third parties as well. And that can be pharmaceutical companies if required. But there's a whole basis of they have to have approval before anybody can have access. And there's an approval process for anybody to do projects with that data. But most of our patients in the UK, we have 37 centres. And we, for the Royal Free, we have over 500 patients that we're putting data into. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. Elizabeth, what about here in Belgium? Is that the experience that patients are very willing to share this data?
Yes, I agree. It's actually the same experience. Patients are willing to share data because they realize that only in these ultra-rare diseases, often the only way of learning to really know what the best treatment is and what the best treatment options is really sharing the data. And we also have the opportunity to have the 3 options available, and I think that's crucial. So we actually have hardly ever seen a patient who doesn't want to contribute their data to a registry.
It's very encouraging, thank you. And also encouraging, we have some news from Latin America about how the developments there in terms of newborn diagnosis and plasma collections across Brazil have been improving. Something really exciting. And let's take a moment now to go to Professor Antonio Condino with this video message.
Hi everyone, my name is Antonio Condino. I am a professor of immunology here in São Paulo, Brazil. For metabolic diseases, lysosomal diseases, and including the primary immunodeficiencies. So now we are performing TREC and QUEX at birth. And I would like to tell you good news that in the city of São Paulo, which is an area of over 20 million inhabitants. In our lab, we have screened around 200,050 babies and found 8 SCIDs, 2 gamma-globulinias, and 1 congenital leukemia. That was the first report on a congenital leukemia. And overall, we also found around 150 babies that had other kind of immunodeficiencies and are under current follow-up. So this is a major progress, and we will keep you posted about how this program will evolve eventually. Additionally, next week, the Senate of Brazil will discuss another constitutional amendment allowing plasma collection in our country. This is a major step in order to optimize the obtention of plasma and as well the manufacturing of immunoglobulins that are strictly required to treat primary immunodeficient patients. So our country, which is a big country of 200 million people, has the chance to join the club of the plasma collecting countries. I wish I can give you this good news soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed to Professor Antonio Condino. Thank you very much. Lovely to get that video message and lovely to have this reach right across the world. So we've talked about then the value of data, but how are we going to collect it? Where do we store it? And it was mentioned earlier about registries. So let's focus in on that for a moment. The importance of registries for PID patients. And this is one of the big asks in the call to action for this year's World PI Week focus. How can we make sure that registries are in place? Are there some good practices worldwide? Isabel, perhaps I could ask you first, what about the importance then of patient registries? Why are they so vital?
Well, from what we've learned before, I think they're crucial in primary immunodeficiency care. Why is that? For many reasons, like Nizar already alluded to. We know so much about presentation of patients with primary immunodeficiency, but not only that, we know about what is the best treatment, the optimal IgE level, what is the outcome after gene therapy, etc. So almost every major step we've taken in the field of primary immunodeficiency is actually thanks to registering those data, those patient data. So I would say they are crucial for, daily clinical work and daily care for patients with primary immunodeficiency. That's their value.
Sorry, is that your experience, that it needs to be formalized in some way in registries?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, definitely. I mean, this is how we learn from our patients and about their diseases. Immunodeficiencies are quite rare, as we've said, and it's still quite young specialty in the bigger schemes of things. And so we're finding out so much more, and we're doing new genetic diseases and genetic causes, but we're also, it's with the different treatments that we're also learning as well. And it's, like I was saying earlier, what works for one patient, might help another patient, but also I think in the way of one size doesn't fit all. So, our patients are very different. And so what may work for one may not work for another. And so by having this data, it's vital. And we can really learn from that. And I think a lot of our patients, they're also happy to provide this data because not only will it help them, but hopefully future generations.
And what about Nizar? What about your experience with the French registry? What value have you been able to gain from setting that up?
So actually many values. It is a tool that we use on an everyday basis. It helps providing insights and accurate insights on the prevalence and the incidence. So the prevalence is basically the number of patients who are currently followed in the country, and the incidence is the number of new cases per year. So these indicators are interesting to have in order to make sure that we have diagnosed patients as we were expecting to, and there is no underdiagnosis. So that in rare diseases, and PIDs are rare diseases, so we face this issue of underdiagnosis, and a patient that is left undiagnosed for a long time will suffer unnecessary comorbidities that can even lead to end organ damage. So that's interesting, and you can also compare one area of the country to another and provide maps and these kind of things. That is really helpful on an everyday basis. You can also lobby your ministries of health or health agencies. You can also monitor how is implemented immunoglobulin replacement therapy within your country. You can make sure that the patients are followed up in a fashion that capturing data from the medical records, make sure that you can identify the key issues for this particular patient based on what we have learned from the natural history studies for specific PIDs, including quality of life, including also bone marrow transplantation, because we also have a registry for bone marrow transplant in PIDs. And we can, starting from patient data, publishing these data at a national or international level through our collaborations can help improve the care that we can provide back to the patients on the clinical care level.
And I noticed that you suggest lobbying. I think Ottilia is our lobbyist here. She's been campaigning outside her Ministry of Health. Ottilia, what do you make of this? The need to make it known that registries are an important way forward.
Well, besides medical registries, there are also other ways to collect and analyze data, such as patient-generated health data. I've already spoken previously about the IPOPI survey on ID shortages, and I have another great example, which is a survey on COVID-19 vaccination in patients with primary immunodeficiencies, which is an international survey on patient vaccine hesitancy and self-reported adverse events. This was a joint effort of IPOPI, ECID, and INGID, and was completed by more than 1,300 patients from 40 countries worldwide. We are very proud that the results of this study were published in Frontiers, and I would also like to highlight the fact that this was a patient-driven survey. Another wonderful example is the PID Life Index, which is an interactive tool developed by IPOPI that is measuring the global PID environment based on 6 PID principles of care, which are diagnosis, treatment, universal health coverage, specialized PID centers, national patient organizations, and registries. This tool aggregates national PID data worldwide and allows handling a large amount of data on the key indicators for PID patients. You can also use this tool for describing or comparing life with a PID in a given country or region of the world. The data is displayed through a map of the world or through a data visualization system that is ranking the countries after an index score. The PID Life Index is a first attempt to provide a global harmonized educational approach to what are the gold standard principles of care for PIDs and what patients with PIDs and medical experts should focus on to improve the national PID environment. It provides measurable information on key PID indicators, allowing worldwide country-to-country comparisons to empower PID stakeholders to make informed choices and support advocacy on a national, regional, or a global level.
Thank you. And Bruce, in Malaysia, I wonder, what about registries there? Are there any gaps in the system?
Thank you. I think first and foremost, I would like to say that data collection is very, very important and crucial, especially in advocacy. Unfortunately for Malaysia, I think not only in Malaysia, I speak also for the countries in the Southeast Asia region. Most of the countries here, whereby example of Malaysia is the Ministry of Health of Malaysia, we do not have registry for PID, not even for the entire rare diseases. However, Malaysia Primary Immunodeficiency Network, which is MIPIN, that consists of a group of immunologists from the academia side, they have their own sets of registry on the PIDs. But the challenge that we face in Malaysia is to unite the academia side with the Ministry of Health side, unite them, and whereby they can share the data between MIPIN and MOH, whereby I believe strongly that as a patient group or myopathy, we need to iron out this concern on the intellectual property, the IP rights, or the GDPR. These are the gaps that form in Malaysia in terms of registry.
Thank you. And I wonder then, perhaps an overview, Isabel, with your role in ESID, is there some way that an organization like that can try to help to harmonize in some way in terms of promoting registries?
Yes, well, and I think also Nizar can testify here because he was the chair of the ISIT registry for a long time. So I think ISIT registry represents a core set of data that we are collecting in a longitudinal way in patients with primary immunodeficiencies worldwide, actually, because the frame set of data collection is also being used outside Europe. And for instance, Canada is showing interest, and several other countries are actually willing to also use those core data sets and to start using that structure that is in place. Now, also Bruce highlighted some of the bottlenecks or the gaps that are problematic often is, for instance, the ability to share those data across country borders. And the GDPR laws that are in place are not always helpful in this, and we are going to a huge transition also there. But on the other hand, I think if we all stick to this set of data that we can gather worldwide, it will open tremendous opportunities to study rare diseases in a let's say in an advanced way, and to really learn from that. And I think the big next bottleneck is absolutely the funding, and I think that's also something that we need to highlight. Data are crucial, but we also need the people to put the data into those registries to really have high quality data that are really worth comparing and are really worth collecting. And I think that is a big gap in current status also for ISIT registry, is the continuous looking for funding to be able to maintain that registry and to better even let's say exploit it and to use it for patients' benefits. And I think that's an important remark to be made.
Yes, and thanks. And so, Vanessa, with your own experience and the roles you've had, and is it important then to share if Europe's collating data, getting registries, but as we've heard from Bruce in Malaysia that there are gaps, are you happy to collaborate, to share that data globally, or does it have to stay within the remit of one particular region?
No, I think data should be shared for the benefit of the PID community from all parts of the world. We can learn from everyone. There are some specificities that are continental or regional that we can learn from, and we are lucky to be a very sharing and collaborative community, and it has been the case for several decades, from let's say the early 70s, and in Europe we have been transplanting patients with primary immunodeficiencies, the ones with the most severe forms of primary immunodeficiencies, and we have been able to share data at the European and even more than that, at the global level. And we have been able to show that we have improved survival at the level now that is has never been achieved before. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. And we have been able to show that, and when we say we, I mean the PID community, right? Not only here in Europe or even in my institution, but we have been able to show that newborn screening for severe forms of PID is critical and absolutely fundamental. And it has been also, the case has been formulated through data that we've been gathered at through the registries at the international level.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I wonder on a sort of day-to-day basis how it works, how you are collecting that data and inputting it.
Yeah, so from a day-to-day basis for nurses, from a nurse perspective, so we will be administering infusions, for example, and so we will use that data and we will put it into, in the UK, well, at my hospital we have an electronic patient record, so then other healthcare professionals, if our patient was to be admitted, they would know that they've had whatever medication, they know what disease they've had or they've got, they know if they're currently taking antibiotics, so it's sharing that data. And also, I think we also have a national immunoglobulin database, as other countries do as well, so this also can tell us what the immunoglobulin is being used for, what indications it's being used for, how it's being used. For the immunodeficiency patients, we also have to register an immunoglobulin level on an annual basis, and so that's another way of gathering data. And that's a national database. It can also record our work, what we're doing as nurses. So if we're increasing our infusions, say from 10 infusions a day to 20 infusions a day, so you've got that data, and that may help increase our workforce. It might not, but it might do with funding. But then also in clinics, so because I'm sort of half and half, so I'm going to do both of it together here, but we have our patients, they complete a form for the UK PID registry whilst they wait, and this will be the number of infections that they've had, the number of courses of antibiotics, what they've had, if they've had any changes in medications, any new diagnoses, and then when they go in to see the doctor or the nurse, then they've already gone through that, and so they can actually, the doctors or the nurses can then spend more time doing other aspects of whatever's happening with the patient, if that makes sense. So and then that data will also go then into the database, and so we can see what antibiotics are effective for what indications, and then also the number of patients that are on immunoglobulins, what kind of immunoglobulin they're on, or if they're having intravenous or subcutaneous, and what methods of administration, if they're on prophylactic antibiotics or not. And so if you have all this data about all of your patients, then it gives you a better insight into how to manage their conditions. And then also from a research perspective, because we have our databases of which patient is enrolled into which study, where the blood is going to, we do a lot of collaborative research, so we send our blood not only nationally but all over the world, and so then we know our patients have gone into this study or that study. And the patients really like to know what's going on with the research as well. And so then when we have more information, we then can relay this information back to the patients, and then it empowers them. And then and also having sort of access to all of their records as well, then the patients will then make more informed decisions about their own care.
That makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
the subcutaneous IG, Bruce is somebody who knows about this. It's fabulous to hear his own story of his own son there. So Bruce, what about that? What about that patient involvement that Sari's talking about there for the registries? How important is that, and how much does it come as a push from the patient side?
As I mentioned just now, patient collecting data collection is very important. We at MyPoppy, we are very honored and glad that our members are very supportive to any research, studies, or data collection. The most recent collaboration that we had was with the University of Science Malaysia. It was on quality of life for patients and families affected with PID. And the paper was just published on Journal of Clinical Immunology. What we do with that paper, strategically, MyPoppy, we use those findings to advocate to Ministry of Health on, number one, the need to have PID patient cared for clinical immunologists and to be recognized clinical immunologists as subspecialty in Malaysia. Number two, to implement or to make available SCIG treatment as an alternative hemoglobin replacement therapy to IVIG. This year, we in my poppy, we are collaborating with the University Kebangsaan Malaysia master's student to a research titled Knowledge, Awareness, and Perception on Genetic Testing for Primary Immunodeficiency Disease among patients and all caregivers and patients in Malaysia. So that stress that patient involvement is important to make it a successful research study.
And in terms of the politics of this, the policymakers, perhaps ask Attilia, what would you want to ask of the policymakers? What's your brief ask to them to say this could make a difference?
Well, policymakers have a key role in the development of registries worldwide, and they have the competence to develop a legal framework that may facilitate the collection of health data and its access in a trusted and secure way. Through registries, we are able to better understand the disease, especially when we speak about rare diseases such as primary immunodeficiencies, to identify risk factors and speed up diagnosis, to promote research and innovation, and so much more. In Europe, the European health data space is a good step in that direction, but to set up or improve medical registries in the context of the European health data space, policymakers could consider the following steps, hopefully. So to develop common data models in order to ensure that medical registries are interoperable and can share data across borders. It's important to develop common data models that standardize how data is collected and stored. To ensure data quality and privacy, medical registries rely on accurate and reliable data, and policymakers may establish measures to ensure data quality and protect patient privacy. To foster collaboration in order to maximize the benefits of medical registries, policymakers should encourage collaboration among stakeholders, including healthcare providers, researchers, patients, and also industry. Well, there is also a need to provide funding and resources, because medical registries require a significant investment in terms of funding, infrastructures, and personnel. Policymakers should prioritize resources for the development and maintenance of medical registries. And also maybe to ensure that medical registries are managed effectively and ethically, and establish governance and oversight mechanisms that ensure the transparency, accountability, and ethical use of data.
Well, I think coming from the patient side of things, that's fantastic. You've got a great long list. We're going to see what we can do on that list, put it to policymakers. But that's fantastic, because that is the ask of World PI Week in terms of really making it clear what's needed, what can make a difference. Isabel, here in Brussels, there's a lot of politicians floating around in Brussels who have a big impact in the EU. How do you respond to Attilia's wish list? What would you prioritize in there?
Well, if I would be able to play with the money, then actually I would go for all the goals you mentioned, because one cannot be without the other. And I think it's crucial that the registries and the data sets that we are collecting are interoperable. That's absolutely crucial. And of course, we also don't have to reinvent the wheel, because there are good registries, as Nizar has testified. Is it Registry de SCETI, the Registry on Transplants? I mean, updating those sets, making them, I mean, EU fundable, etc., that could really be a big game changer. And I also think it's really nice that the concept of the EU health data space really wants to put emphasis on the fact that it would also really benefit the patient, so that they don't have to undergo needless reinvestigations, that they would have access to their own data wherever that is captured. And I also think that it's really crucial that the borders, indeed, as you say, between the clinicians, the patients, the researchers, but also companies who are actually, we need companies to develop new drugs, new molecules that are really important for our patients, so that those borders disappear, that we can really use the data in a collaborative effort with enough ethical concerns and ethical oversight, but not with restrictions that are making life impossible to all of these stakeholders. I think that's also crucial. So, but it demands a lot of money and a lot of insight into what's happening already.
Political will, maybe.
Also political will, yes.
Yes. I'm so sorry. We won't mention the fact that the UK is perhaps not quite as joined up to Europe as we used to be. However, we'll gloss over that bit to focus on what I think the point that was raised about interoperability is so important, isn't it? So if these are set up, how do you see it working across Europe, across globally?
Yeah, I think it's really vital because even within the NHS and my centre itself, we had a database that we were trying to export the data into the UK PID registry, and they don't talk to each other, so we couldn't do that. So we need to have the systems in place to actually allow that to happen, because nobody wants to put in data twice. If you've got it there, let's transfer it if we possibly can. But there are rules and regulations that we also have to adhere to, and we appreciate that. But I think it would be if you can, it's funding is the big main thing, but if you can get also the different systems to actually talk to each other and accept the data in the different formats and make it all into one big database, be fantastic. But yeah.
Well, let's ask Lisa. What's your big ask? I thought Attilia's wish list was lovely because it was very comprehensive. But what about for you, Lisa? What's the top of your wish list?
Wow, that is very difficult to answer, actually, because we would love to have all of this. We would not want to focus on only, one aspect. But I think that if I had to choose one, is to really get a broader collaboration and make sure that the core data set elements that we can share and to help collect data for patients with these particular rare diseases, the PIDs, and within the PIDs, some specific diseases, including the ones with some specific genotypes, could be broadly studied and would accelerate the acquisition of knowledge in order to make sure that we provide the best level of care. So really, interoperability is yet to be implemented, and hopefully the new bioinformatic tools and techniques will help doing this, because within the PID community, clinicians, scientists, nurses, patients, and all stakeholders are happy and willing to make that happen, I guess.
Well, thank you, and that's a very positive note there. Thank you so much to all our speakers, to all of you who've joined online, to our speakers here in the studio. We've had some fantastic insights there, and a really great launch, it feels to me, to the start of World PI Week, which is from the 22nd to the 29th of April this year. We have had a really good start by getting your views, getting some of that granular detail. Bruce and Attilia, thank you so much for your personal experiences that have played into this. It's absolutely fantastic to hear your experiences there. It's absolutely wonderful. So for everybody listening online, I'm going to start a round of applause. I hope globally this is resonating around the world. But as we draw to the close of our session, I just want to remember some of those key asks and the key calls to action, the policy asks that are being made this year for World PI Week. And let's just have a look at those on the screen. Some really important asks there, and we've touched on them with that list. I think Attilia's list was just fabulous. Looking at leveraging then the real world evidence, patient reported outcomes, looking at keeping those registries and the comparable data, and as you were both, all of you saying there, the interoperability of systems, because it's all very well setting up one in a different country, but if they don't speak to each other or can't be shared, that's going to be pointless. And Nisa's point about the technology there can play into this, as maybe even AI comes to play in this. And I thought it was interesting that, Attila, you mentioned the ethical use of this information, because that's very much one of the asks that have been put forward, the ethical, responsible, transparent use of health data. And as Sarah here was saying, it's very important to get that consent, and so that patients are with you on that journey, which is really, really important. And the sharing of data so that it has a global impact, with this worldwide effort that is really needed in such a rare disease, in order to shape the collaborative health data ecosystems. And of course, all of this means that it can facilitate innovation and really enhance health systems and really make a difference for the lives of those living with primary immunodeficiencies. So those are the asks. And what can you, the audience, do to get involved? Well, at a national level and at a local level, you can join in on World PI Week and bring about some change. What you need to do is go online to worldpiweek.org. That's worldpiweek.org. And there's a campaign called Data for PIDs. And you can use the hashtags Data for PIDs and the hashtag World PI Week, sharing your thoughts to your myriad of followers on your social media. Please get out there, use those hashtags, look at them online, get involved in the campaign Data for PIDs, because this is going to make a real difference. We're talking there about political will, about the momentum, and you can help by getting involved in this way. So you can find all the relevant details then on the information package, which is available on the World PI Week website. So I hope you'll agree it's been fantastically stimulating listening to our speakers, getting the clinician, the nurse, the insights from the patients, which I found absolutely fascinating. It's lovely to speak to everybody. Let's show our commitment together, everybody online, for the support of access to healthcare for PIDs. What we're going to do, we're going to strike a Y pose. Now, I'm told this references the antibody shape and also symbolizes a community altogether. So perhaps, if they're going to take a photo, 3, 2, 1, strike a pose, strike a Y. And I hope that that is resonating around the world, because it's lovely to have that involvement from everybody. It's been great. Again, thank you so much to our speakers and to our host here in Leuven for this very special launch, a first, let's hope, first of several, maybe next time at another hospital. And to our speakers online and to the audience online. Thank you so much. Thank you to the organisers, and thank you to the sponsors who've made this event possible. It's fantastic to reach so many people. We have been recording this, I believe, so it may be available to watch back when you have another moment. But there's one more thing we want to do to show you before the end of this event, to say thank you very much indeed for joining us. I've had a great time learning so much. It's been my great pleasure to guide these discussions. So let's close this with the launch, the exclusive world premiere of the 2023 World PI Week video. Here it is.
Data changes lives because we can identify specific gene defects that cause primary immunodeficiency through our Jefferies Insights genetic sequencing program.
The Jeffrey Modell Foundation collects data through our global centers network to fulfill our mission of early and accurate diagnosis, improved treatment, and ultimately putting an end to the diagnostic odyssey.
Data changes lives because in the plasma space, it helps us to ensure a high level of donor health protection. It also helps us to identify an even greater number of patients in the rare disease sector, including those suffering from primary immunodeficiencies, who might benefit from plasma-derived therapies.
Health data is essential for patients' lives. Data collected and analyzed through tools such as medical registries or patient-generated health data allow patients to access more efficient, higher quality, safer, and more personalized treatments. It is also a means through which decision makers can acknowledge the existence of the 6 million people affected by PIDs worldwide and to improve health systems accordingly to pursue the goal that one day every single PID patient's treatment is guaranteed.
Real-world data helps improve patients' outcomes by enabling a greater understanding of PIDs. It supports new developments and innovative care pathways for patients.
Data changes lives because it allows us to learn from many patients to deliver precise care to an individual. Worldwide health data allows the rare to become more common so we can learn causes and focus treatments.
Data changes lives because without it, we can never achieve earlier detection for the 70 to 90% of people worldwide who don't yet have a PI diagnosis. There are faces behind those numbers. It's the only way to provide support and treatment to those without a diagnosis, to find people who don't yet know they need to be found.
It is very important to collect data and analyze data about our patients, considering diagnosis and treatment, in order to have a real picture about the situation in our area, so that it will allow us to build correct strategies to solve problems, solve and prevent problems, and evolve to a better picture for the entire community.